Announcer bot is active. 80 minutes remaining in the session. Glenfield from United Kingdom is P4 on mediums. Brian Patterson is P14 on mediums. San Markham from Zimbabwe is P1 with 100 kilos on mediums. Best lap is a 2:07.008. Richard Ogden is P5 on mediums. Eric Bohm from Germany is P9 on mediums. Mark Scott is P8 on mediums. Jovan Oosthuizen from South Africa is P9 on mediums. Brian Patterson is P4. Best lap is a 2:25.427. Mark Scott is P6. Ian Weeks from United Kingdom is P4 on mediums. Best lap is a 2:22.004. Jovan Oosthuizen is P8. Brian Patterson is P5. Ian Weeks is P4 on mediums. Eric Bohm is P7. San Markham is P1 on mediums. Jovan Oosthuizen is P8. Brian Patterson is P5. San Markham is P1. 75 minutes remaining in the session. Brian Patterson is P1. Best lap is a 2:03.924. Richard Ogden is P3. Best lap is a 2:12.037. Jovan Ustjorsen is P8. Ian Weeks is P5. Jovan Ustjorsen is P8. Ian Weeks is P6. Jovan Ustjorsen is P8. San Markham is P3. John Astrup from New Zealand is P2 on mediums. Best lap is a 2:04.996. Martijn Mol from Netherlands is P11 on mediums. John Astrup is P2. Richard Ogden is P4. David Forsyth from Ireland is P7 on mediums. Best lap is a 4:29.482. Richard Ogden is P4. Jovan Ustjorsen is P9. Attila Kseniai from Hungary is P9 with 10 kilos on mediums. John Astrup is P2. Brian Patterson is P1. Jovan Ustjorsen from South Africa is P10. The qualification session is at Marina Bay GP Night version 1.0 Accu in Singapore, Singapore. Brian Patterson is P11 on mediums. The qualifying session is now underway. John Astrup from New Zealand is P6 on mediums. Brian Patterson is P3. Jovan Oosthuizen from South Africa is P5 on mediums. John Astrup is P6. Jovan Oosthuizen is P5. John Astrup is P8. Glenn Field from United Kingdom is P1 on mediums. Rene Robertson is P3 with 40 kilos on mediums. Martijn Mol from Netherlands is P4 on mediums. Rene Robertson is P3 on mediums. Martijn Mol is P4. Brian Patterson is P2. Attila Kseniai from Hungary is P6 with 10 kilos on mediums. Brian Patterson is P2 up 3.55. David Forsyth from Ireland is P6 on mediums. Jovan Oosthuizen is P13. Brian Patterson is P2. 10 minutes remaining in the session. Jovan Ustyosen is P13. John Astrup is P11. Attila Ksenia is P4. John Astrup is P9. Glenn Field is P2 on mediums. Brian Patterson is P1. Best lap is a 2:03.977. Martin Moll is provisional pole with a 2:01.101. Rene Robertson is P3. Best lap is a 2:05.207. 4.106 behind the leader. Ian Morton is P6 on mediums. Sam Markham from Zimbabwe is P8 with 100 kilos on mediums. Best lap is a 5:54.892. 3:53.791 behind the leader. John Astrup is P13. David Forsyth is P10. Eric Bohm from Germany is P2 up 0.38 on mediums. Jovan Ustyosen is P14. Ian Weeks from United Kingdom is P13 on mediums. Ian Weeks improved his P11 with a 2:14.258. 13.157 behind the leader. John Astrup from New Zealand is P5. Best lap is a 2:04.015. 2.914 behind the leader. Jovan Ustyosen is P14 on mediums. Five minutes remaining in the session. John Astrup is P5. Jovan Ustyosen is P14. John Astrup from New Zealand is P5. The race session is at Marina Bay GP Night version 1.0 Accu in Singapore, SIN, Singapore. Glenn Field from United Kingdom is P10 on mediums. Ian Weeks from United Kingdom is P11 on mediums. Ian Morton is P12 on mediums. Attila Kseniai from Hungary is P13 with 10 kilos on mediums. Jovan Ustyosen from South Africa is P14 on mediums. Martijn Mol from Netherlands is P1 on mediums. "30 minutes remaining in the session. Race start. David Forsyth is P4. John Astrup from New Zealand is P4 on mediums. Martijn Mol is P2. John Astrup is P4. San Markham from Zimbabwe is P6 with 100 kilos on mediums. John Astrup is P4. Mark Scott entering the pits is P12. San Markham is P9. David Forsyth from Ireland is P6 on mediums. John Astrup is P4. Martijn Mol is P2. John Astrup is P4, 0.5 behind Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm from Germany is P1 on mediums, 0.7 ahead of Martin Moore. Ian Weeks entering the pits is P9. Ian Morton entering the pits is P12. Ian Weeks is P12. John Astrup is P4, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. David Forsyth is P6. Best lap is a 2:12.486. 7.266 off the fastest lap. David Forsyth is now P5. John Astrup is P3 on mediums, 0.9 ahead of Brian Patterson. Attila Kseniy from Hungary is P8, 0.5 behind Glenn Field. Attila Kseniy is now P7. San Markham is P11, 0.6 behind Richard Ogden. Brian Patterson is P4 on mediums battling Eric Bohm. Brian Patterson is now P3. Richard Ogden is P11 on mediums. Eric Bohm is P4, 0.2 behind Brian Patterson. "25 minutes remaining in the session. Martin Moore is P1, 2.5 ahead of John Astrup. Eric Bohm is P4, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. John Astrup is P2. Best lap is a 2:03.119. 0.511 off the fastest lap. Eric Bohm on lap 3 is P4, 0.5 behind Brian Patterson. John Astrup is P2. Eric Bohm is P4, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm is now P3. John Astrup is P2. Eric Bohn is P3, 1.0 ahead of Brian Patterson. John Astrup is P2 on mediums, 1.6 ahead of Eric Bohn. David Forsyth is P5. Best lap is a 2:03.133. 0.525 of the fastest lap. Jovan Ustjorzen is P10. John Astrup is P2, 1.5 ahead of Eric Bohn. Jovan Ustjorzen entering the pits after 4 laps on mediums is P10. Jovan Ustjorzen is P10, 4.9 ahead of Richard Ogden. Ian Weeks entering the pits after 3 laps on mediums is P12. Jovan Ustjorzen is now P11. Ian Weeks is P12. Glenn Field is P9. "20 minutes remaining in the session. Richard Ogden is P10, 3.3 ahead of Jovan Ustjorzen. Richard Ogden was 6.7 faster last lap. David Forsyth on lap 5 is P5, 1.3 behind Brian Patterson. David Forsyth is now P6. Jovan Ustjorzen is P11, 0.2 behind Richard Ogden. Richard Ogden was 6.7 faster last lap. Jovan Ustjorzen is now P10. John Astrup on lap 6 is P2, 1.4 ahead of Eric Bohn. Richard Ogden is P11, 0.4 ahead of Jovan Ustjorzen. Richard Ogden is now P10. Richard Ogden is now P11. Eric Bohn is P3, 0.5 behind John Astrup. Jovan Ustjorzen from South Africa is P11, 1.7 behind Richard Ogden. John Astrup is P2, 0.7 ahead of Eric Bohn. Ian Weeks is P12, 0.6 behind Richard Ogden. John Astrup is P3, 0.1 behind Eric Bone. Ian Weeks is P12, 0.4 behind Richard Ogden. John Astrup is P3, 0.7 behind Eric Bone. Martin Moll is P1. John Astrup is P3 on mediums, 0.9 behind Eric Bone. Ian Weeks is P11, 1.6 behind Richard Ogden. John Astrup is P3, 1.0 behind Eric Bone. Glenfield is P9. John Astrup from New Zealand is P3, 0.5 behind Eric Bone. "15 minutes remaining in the session. David Forsyth entering the pits after 7 laps on mediums is P6. David Forsyth is P6. Glenfield is P9, 3.3 ahead of Richard Ogden. Richard Ogden was 8.0 faster last lap. David Forsyth is P8, 1.0 behind Sam Markham. Martin Moll is P1. Best lap is a 2:02.227. John Astrup on lap 8 is P3, 1.3 behind Eric Bone. Attila Ksenia is P6. Richard Ogden is P10, 1.0 behind Glenfield. Attila Ksenia is P6. Glenfield entering the pits after 8 laps on mediums is P11. John Astrup is P3, 1.6 behind Eric Bone. Attila Ksenia entering the pits after 8 laps on mediums is P6. Attila Ksenia is P6. Brian Patterson is P4, 4.2 ahead of Rene Robertson. Attila Ksenia is P8. John Astrup from New Zealand is P3, 2.2 behind Eric Bone. Ian Weeks is P10. Richard Ogden entering the pits after 8 laps on mediums is P9. Richard Ogden is P9. Best lap is a 2:09.060. 6.833 of the fastest lap. Martijan Moll entering the pits after 9 laps on mediums is P1. Martijan Moll is P2. Brian Patterson is P4. Best lap is a 2:03.265. 1.038 of the fastest lap. Martijan Moll is P3, 1.0 ahead of Brian Patterson. Martijan Moll is now P4. Sam Markham is P6, 1.4 ahead of David Forsyth. Mark Scott is P13 on mediums. Mark Scott entering the pits after 2 laps on mediums is P13. Brian Patterson is P3, 2.8 ahead of Martijan Moll. David Forsyth is P7, 1.4 behind Sam Markham. David Forsyth was 3.8 faster last lap. 10 minutes remaining in the session. Ian Weeks is P9. Richard Ogden is P10 on mediums. Richard Ogden is now P9. Sam Markham on lap 10 is P6. Martijan Moll on lap 10 is P4, 1.1 behind Brian Patterson. Rene Robertson entering the pits after 10 laps on mediums is P5. Rene Robertson is P5. Brian Patterson is P4, 0.3 behind Martijan Moll. Rene Robertson is P5 with 40 kilos on mediums. Martijan Moll is P3, 0.6 ahead of Brian Patterson. Brian Patterson was 20.7 faster last lap. Brian Patterson is P4, 2.1 behind Martijan Moll. John Astrup is P2. Best lap is a 2:02.896. 0.669 of the fastest lap. San Marcom is P6. Ian Weeks is P10. John Astrup entering the pits after 11 laps on mediums is P2. John Astrup is P2. Brian Patterson on lap 11 is P4. Brian Patterson entering the pits after 11 laps on mediums is P4. Rene Robertson is P5. Best lap is a 2:05.118. 2.891 off the fastest lap. John Astrup is P3. Rene Robertson is P4 with 40 kilos, 0.6 ahead of Brian Patterson. Richard Ogden is P9 on mediums. Brian Patterson is P5, 0.2 behind Rene Robertson. Ian Weeks is P10. Brian Patterson is P5, 0.4 behind Rene Robertson. Five minutes remaining in the session. Rene Robertson is P4 with 40 kilos, 0.1 ahead of Brian Patterson. Ian Weeks is P10. Brian Patterson is P5 on mediums, 0.4 behind Rene Robertson. San Markham is P7 on mediums, 0.1 behind David Forsyth. Brian Patterson is P5 on mediums, 0.4 behind Rene Robertson. Rene Robertson is P4, 0.2 ahead of Brian Patterson. Rene Robertson is now P5. David Forsyth is P6, 5.0 ahead of San Markham. Rene Robertson on lap 14 is P5, 1.3 behind Brian Patterson. San Markham is P7, 0.9 ahead of Attila Kseniai. Richard Ogden is P9. Rene Robertson is P5, 0.5 behind Brian Patterson. David Forsyth is P6. Rene Robertson is P5, 0.3 behind Brian Patterson. Richard Ogden is P9. Richard Ogden entering the pits after 6 laps on mediums is P9. Rene Robertson is P5, 0.5 behind Brian Patterson. Richard Ogden is P9. Rene Robertson is P5 with 40 kilos, 0.5 behind Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm is P1, 1.1 ahead of Martijn Mol. Martijn Mol was 3.7 faster last lap. The leader has just finished the race. Eric Bohm finished P1. Martijn Mol finished P2. Ian Weeks finished P10. John Astrup finished P3. Brian Patterson finished P4. Rene Robertson finished P5. David Forsyth finished P6. Richard Ogden finished P9. Attila Kseni finished P8. San Markham finished P7. Ian Weeks finished P10. The race session is at Marina Bay GP Night version 1.0 Accu in Singapore, Sin, Singapore. Martijn Mol is P1. Brian Patterson is P2 on mediums. Eric Bohm from Germany is P3 on mediums. David Forsyth from Ireland is P4 on mediums. Rene Robertson is P5 with 40 kilos on mediums. John Astrup from New Zealand is P6 on mediums. Sam Markham from Zimbabwe is P7 with 100 kilos on mediums. Mark Scott is P8 on mediums. Richard Ogden is P9 on mediums. Ian Weeks from United Kingdom is P10 on mediums. Ian Morton is P11 on mediums. Attila Kseni from Hungary is P12 with 10 kilos on mediums. Martijn Mol from Netherlands is P1 on mediums. San Markham entering the pits is P7. Martigan Moll entering the pits is P1. Rene Robertson entering the pits is P5. John Astrup entering the pits is P6. Eric Bohm entering the pits is P3. Brian Patterson entering the pits is P2. 30 minutes remaining in the session. Race start. Ian Morton is P12. Richard Ogden is P4. Ian Weeks is P3. David Forsyth is P1. Richard Ogden is P4. Mark Scott is P2. Richard Ogden entering the pits is P4. David Forsyth is P1, 3.6 ahead of Mark Scott. Mark Scott is P2. David Forsyth is P1 on mediums, 1.3 ahead of Mark Scott. David Forsyth entering the pits after 2 laps on mediums is P2. Ian Morton is P12. Mark Scott entering the pits after 2 laps on mediums is P1. The race session is at Marina Bay GP Night version 1.0 Accu in Singapore, SIN, Singapore. Martigan Moll is P1. Brian Patterson is P2 on mediums. Eric Bohm from Germany is P3 on mediums. David Forsyth from Ireland is P4 on mediums. Rene Robertson is P5 with 40 kilos on mediums. John Astrup from New Zealand is P6 on mediums. San Markham from Zimbabwe is P7 with 100 kilos on mediums. Mark Scott is P8 on mediums. Richard Ogden is P9 on mediums. Ian Weeks from United Kingdom is P10 on mediums. Ian Morton is P11 on mediums. Attila Kseniai from Hungary is P12 with 10 kilos on mediums. Martigan Moll from Netherlands is P1 on mediums. "30 minutes remaining in the session. Race start. John Astrup is P6. Martin Wall is P2. John Astrup is P4. Martin Wall is P2. Richard Ogden is P7. Martin Wall is P2. Eric Bohm is P1. San Markham is P7. Martin Wall is P2. Richard Ogden is P10. Martin Wall is P2, 0.1 behind Eric Bohm. Martin Wall is now P1. Brian Patterson is P3, 0.1 behind Eric Bohm. David Forsyth is P6, 0.6 behind Rene Robertson. Eric Bohm is P2, 0.5 behind Martin Wall. David Forsyth is P6. Best lap is a 2:11.359. 4.417 of the fastest lap. Eric Bohm is P2, 0.7 behind Martin Wall. David Forsyth is P6. Ian Morton is P11. Ian Morton entering the pits after 2 laps on mediums is P11. San Markham is P7, 0.4 behind David Forsyth. Eric Bohm on lap 3 is P2, 0.5 behind Martin Wall. David Forsyth on lap 3 is P6, 0.5 behind Rene Robertson. Eric Bohm is P2, 0.4 behind Martin Wall. "25 minutes remaining in the session. David Forsyth is P6, 0.6 behind Rene Robertson. Ian Weeks is P9 on mediums, 3.4 behind Richard Ogden. Eric Bohm is P2. Best lap is a 2:03.767. 0.869 off the fastest lap. David Forsyth from Ireland is P6, 0.8 behind Rene Robertson. John Astrup on lap 3 is P4, 0.5 behind Brian Patterson. David Forsyth from Ireland is P6, 0.6 behind Rene Robertson. San Markham entering the pits after 3 laps on mediums is P7. John Astrup on lap 4 is P4, 0.3 behind Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm is P2, 1.9 behind Martin Wall. David Forsyth from Ireland is P6, 0.5 behind Rene Robertson. Eric Bohm is P2, 2.2 ahead of Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm was 1.3 faster last lap. Eric Bohm entering the pits after 4 laps on mediums is P4. Brian Patterson is P3, 0.3 behind John Astrup. John Astrup is P5, 4.1 behind Brian Patterson. Brian Patterson is P4, 0.5 behind David Forsyth. David Forsyth is P3, 0.4 ahead of Brian Patterson. Martin Wall is P1. Ian Weeks is P7 on mediums, 0.4 behind Richard Ogden. David Forsyth is P3, 0.5 behind Rene Robertson. Ian Weeks is P7, 0.5 behind Richard Ogden. Ian Weeks is now P6. David Forsyth is P3. Best lap is a 2:03.572. 1.326 off the fastest lap. Richard Ogden is P7, 0.4 behind Ian Weeks. Richard Ogden is now P6. Brian Patterson is P4, 0.3 behind David Forsyth. David Forsyth was 5.5 faster last lap. 20 minutes remaining in the session. David Forsyth is P3, 0.5 ahead of Brian Patterson. Martin Wall is P1. ReneRmotorsport-Assetto is P2, 1.3 ahead of David Forsyth. Martin Wall is P1. Best lap is a 2:02.246. David Forsyth is P3. Richard Ogden entering the pits after 5 laps on mediums is P7. Ian Weeks is P6. Richard Ogden is P7. David Forsyth is P3, 0.5 behind ReneRmotorsport-Assetto. Richard Ogden on lap 6 is P7. Martin Wall is P1 on mediums. David Forsyth is P3, 0.6 behind ReneRmotorsport-Assetto. Martin Wall is P1. David Forsyth is P3. Ian Morton is P10 on mediums. Martin Wall is P1. John Astrup is P4, 0.4 behind David Forsyth. David Forsyth is P3. John Astrup from New Zealand is P4, 0.4 behind David Forsyth. David Forsyth is P4, 0.6 behind John Astrup. David Forsyth entering the pits after 7 laps on mediums is P4. Brian Patterson on lap 7 is P5. "15 minutes remaining in the session. Brian Patterson is now P4. David Forsyth is P5. John Astrup is P3, 0.5 behind Rene Robertson. John Astrup was 1.9 faster last lap. Richard Ogden on lap 7 is P7. John Astrup on lap 8 is P3, 0.4 behind Rene Robertson. Ian Morton entering the pits after 2 laps on mediums is P10. David Forsyth is P5. John Astrup is P3, 0.2 behind Rene Robertson. Richard Ogden is P7. Rene Robertson entering the pits after 8 laps on mediums is P3. Rene Robertson is P3. Brian Patterson entering the pits after 8 laps on mediums is P4. Brian Patterson is P4. Martin Wall is P1. Brian Patterson is P5. David Forsyth is P3, 1.4 ahead of Rene Robertson. Ian Weeks is P6. Richard Ogden is P7. Richard Ogden entering the pits after 3 laps on mediums is P7. Brian Patterson is P5. Martin Wall entering the pits after 9 laps on mediums is P1. Martin Wall on lap 10 is P1. Brian Patterson on lap 9 is P5. Martin Wall on lap 10 is P1, 1.1 ahead of John Astrup. Martin Wall is now P2. John Astrup is P1 on mediums. Ian Morton is P10. David Forsyth is P3, 2.8 ahead of Rene Robertson. Ian Morton is P10. 10 minutes remaining in the session. Brian Patterson is P5. Martin Moll on lap 10 is P2. Ian Weeks is P6. Brian Patterson is P5. John Astrup entering the pits after 10 laps on mediums is P1. David Forsyth from Ireland is P3, 3.4 ahead of Rene Robertson. John Astrup is P2. John Astrup is now P3. Ian Weeks on lap 10 is P6. Brian Patterson is P5. John Astrup is P3, 0.9 behind David Forsyth. David Forsyth is P2, 0.5 ahead of John Astrup. Ian Weeks entering the pits after 10 laps on mediums is P6. John Astrup is P3. Ian Weeks is P6. John Astrup is P3, 0.3 behind David Forsyth. David Forsyth was 14.6 faster last lap. Ian Morton is P8. John Astrup is P3, 0.2 behind David Forsyth. Ian Morton entering the pits after 2 laps on mediums is P8. John Astrup is now P2. Richard Ogden is P6. John Astrup on lap 12 is P2, 1.2 ahead of David Forsyth. Richard Ogden on lap 11 is P6. Ian Weeks is P7 on mediums. Five minutes remaining in the session. Richard Ogden on lap 11 is P6. David Forsyth is P4. John Astrup is P2, 3.7 ahead of Rene Robertson. Rene Robertson is P3, 3.5 behind John Astrup. Brian Patterson on lap 13 is P5, 4.0 behind David Forsyth. Richard Ogden is P6. Brian Patterson is P5. Best lap is a 2:04.016. 1.770 of the fastest lap. Ian Weeks is P7. David Forsyth is P4, 4.6 ahead of Brian Patterson. Brian Patterson was 11.7 faster last lap. Martin Wall is P1 on mediums. Richard Ogden is P6. Rene Robertson is P3. David Forsyth is P4, 2.4 ahead of Brian Patterson. Rene Robertson is P3 with 40 kilos. Brian Patterson is P5 on mediums, 2.9 behind David Forsyth. Brian Patterson was 1.6 faster last lap. David Forsyth is P4, 2.6 ahead of Brian Patterson. John Astrup is P2 on mediums. Martin Wall is P1. John Astrup is P2. Best lap is a 2:02.904. 0.658 of the fastest lap. Martin Wall is P1 on mediums. Ian Weeks from United Kingdom is P7. Richard Ogden is P6. Brian Patterson is P5, 1.1 behind David Forsyth. Brian Patterson was 0.9 faster last lap. David Forsyth is P4. Richard Ogden is P6. Brian Patterson is P5, 3.2 behind David Forsyth. David Forsyth is P4, 2.4 ahead of Brian Patterson. John Astrup from New Zealand is P2. Ian Weeks is P7 on mediums. John Astrup is P2. Richard Ogden on lap 15 is P6. David Forsyth is P4, 2.1 ahead of Brian Patterson. Martin Moll is P1. The leader has just finished the race. Martin Moll finished P1. John Astrup finished P2. Richard Ogden finished P6. Rene Robertson finished P3. David Forsyth finished P4. Ian Weeks is P7. Brian Patterson finished P5. The race session is at Marina Bay GP Night version 1.0 Accu in Singapore, Sin, Singapore. Brian Patterson is P4 on mediums. John Astrup from New Zealand is P6 on mediums. David Forsyth from Ireland is P8 on mediums. John Astrup is P6. Brian Patterson is P4. John Astrup is P5. Rene Robertson is P3 with 40 kilos on mediums. John Astrup is P5. Ian Morton is P2 on mediums. John Astrup is P5. Ian Morton is P2. John Astrup is P5. Richard Ogden is P1 on mediums. John Astrup is P5. Richard Ogden is P1. John Astrup is P5. Ian Morton is P2. John Astrup is P5. The qualification session is at Marina Bay GP Night version 1.0 Accu in Singapore, SIN, Singapore. Brian Patterson is P8 on mediums. The qualifying session is now underway. The race session is at Marina Bay GP Night version 1.0 Accu in Singapore, SIN, Singapore. Eric Bohm is P1. Brian Patterson is P2 on mediums. Rene Robertson is P3 with 40 kilos on mediums. John Astrup from New Zealand is P4 on mediums. Martijn Mol from Netherlands is P5 on mediums. Ian Morton is P6 on mediums. Richard Ogden is P7 on mediums. David Forsyth from Ireland is P8 on mediums. Eric Bohm from Germany is P1 on mediums. "30 minutes remaining in the session. Race start. Rene Robertson is P3. Martijn Mol is P5. John Astrup is P3. David Forsyth is P7. Martin Wall is P4. Ian Morton is P8. Eric Bohm is P5. Martin Wall is P4. Eric Bohm is P5. Martin Wall is P4, 0.5 behind Rene Robertson. Brian Patterson is P1, 0.5 ahead of John Astrup. Martin Wall is P4. Best lap is a 2:10.777. 3.350 of the fastest lap. John Astrup is P2. Best lap is a 2:08.930. 1.503 of the fastest lap. Martin Wall is P4, 0.2 ahead of Eric Bohm. John Astrup is P2, 0.5 behind Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm from Germany is P6, 0.1 behind David Forsyth. Eric Bohm is now P5. John Astrup is P2, 0.5 behind Brian Patterson. Martin Wall from Netherlands is P4, 0.6 behind Rene Robertson. John Astrup is P2, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. Rene Robertson on lap 3 is P4, 0.1 behind Martin Wall. Rene Robertson is now P3. John Astrup is P2, 0.3 behind Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm is P4, 0.3 behind Rene Robertson. "25 minutes remaining in the session. John Astrup is P2 on mediums, 0.3 behind Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm on lap 3 is P4, 0.1 behind Rene Robertson. John Astrup is P2 on mediums, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. John Astrup was 1.1 faster last lap. Eric Bohm is P4, 0.1 behind Rene Robertson. John Astrup is P2. Best lap is a 2:03.762. Eric Bohm is P4, 0.3 behind Rene Robertson. John Astrup is P2, 0.3 behind Brian Patterson. Brian Patterson on lap 4 is P1, 0.3 ahead of John Astrup. Martijn Mol entering the pits after 3 laps on mediums is P7. Martijn Mol is P7. Brian Patterson is P1 on mediums battling John Astrup. Rene Robertson is P4 battling Eric Bohm. John Astrup is P2. Rene Robertson is P4, 0.4 behind Eric Bohm. David Forsyth is P6, 0.5 behind Richard Ogden. John Astrup is P2, 0.5 behind Brian Patterson. Ian Morton is P8. John Astrup is P2. Richard Ogden is P5. Best lap is a 2:07.562. 4.133 of the fastest lap. John Astrup is P2. Richard Ogden is P6, 0.4 behind David Forsyth. John Astrup is P2 on mediums, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm on lap 5 is P3, 4.2 behind John Astrup. John Astrup is P2. Richard Ogden is P6. Best lap is a 2:07.227. 3.798 of the fastest lap. 20 minutes remaining in the session. John Astrup is P2, 0.3 behind Brian Patterson. Richard Ogden is P6. John Astrup is P2, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. Ian Morton is P8. John Astrup on lap 6 is P2, 0.1 behind Brian Patterson. Rene Robertson is P4. Brian Patterson is P2, 0.3 behind John Astrup. John Astrup is P1, 0.4 ahead of Brian Patterson. Ian Morton is P8. Brian Patterson is P2, 0.7 behind John Astrup. Ian Morton is P8. Eric Bohm is P3, 0.5 behind Brian Patterson. John Astrup is P1, 1.3 ahead of Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm is P3, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. Richard Ogden is P7, 1.5 behind Martin Moore. John Astrup is P1, 1.0 ahead of Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm on lap 7 is P3, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. Brian Patterson entering the pits after 7 laps on mediums is P3. Brian Patterson is P3. Rene Robertson is P4. Rene Robertson is now P3. 15 minutes remaining in the session. Brian Patterson is P5. John Astrup on lap 8 is P1, 1.1 ahead of Eric Bohm. Richard Ogden entering the pits after 7 laps on mediums is P7. Richard Ogden is P7. Brian Patterson is P5. Richard Ogden is P7. John Astrup is P1, 1.2 ahead of Eric Bohm. Martin Wall is P6. Best lap is a 2:01.621. John Astrup is P1 on mediums, 0.7 ahead of Eric Bohm. Ian Morton entering the pits after 7 laps on mediums is P8. Eric Bohm entering the pits after 8 laps on mediums is P2. Eric Bohm is P2. Brian Patterson is P5. Rene Robertson entering the pits after 8 laps on mediums is P3. David Forsyth entering the pits after 8 laps on mediums is P4. David Forsyth is P4. Brian Patterson is P4. Brian Patterson is now P2. Rene Robertson is P4, 1.9 ahead of Martin Wall. Rene Robertson is now P5. David Forsyth on lap 9 is P6. Eric Bohm is P3 on mediums, 1.2 behind Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm was 18.1 faster last lap. David Forsyth on lap 9 is P6. Eric Bohm is P3, 0.7 behind Brian Patterson. John Astrup is P1. Eric Bohm is P3, 0.2 behind Brian Patterson. John Astrup entering the pits after 9 laps on mediums is P1. Ian Morton entering the pits is P8. Ian Morton is P8. Brian Patterson is P1, 0.8 ahead of Eric Bohm. Eric Bohm is P2, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. Ian Morton is P8 on mediums. "10 minutes remaining in the session." Eric Bohm on lap 10 is P2, 0.2 behind Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm is now P1. David Forsyth is P6. Eric Bohm is P2, 0.3 behind Brian Patterson. Ian Morton is P8. Eric Bohm is P2, 0.3 behind Brian Patterson. Brian Patterson entering the pits after 3 laps on mediums is P2. Brian Patterson is P2. Brian Patterson is now P4. Rene Robertson is P3, 0.5 ahead of Brian Patterson. Richard Ogden is P7. Brian Patterson is P4, 0.3 behind Rene Robertson. Rene Robertson is P3. Best lap is a 2:03.593. 1.972 off the fastest lap. Brian Patterson is P4, 0.1 behind John Astrup. Brian Patterson is now P3. John Astrup is P4, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. Martin Moll is P2. Brian Patterson is P4 battling John Astrup. Brian Patterson is now P3. John Astrup is P4 on mediums, 0.3 behind Brian Patterson. Rene Robertson is P5, 1.4 behind John Astrup. John Astrup is P4 on mediums, 0.1 behind Brian Patterson. John Astrup was 12.1 faster last lap. David Forsyth from Ireland is P6. 5 minutes remaining in the session. John Astrup is P4, 0.3 behind Brian Patterson. Richard Ogden is P7. John Astrup is P4, 0.3 behind Brian Patterson. Rene Robertson is P4, 0.4 behind Brian Patterson. Rene Robertson is now P3. David Forsyth is P6. Brian Patterson is P5 on mediums, 0.5 behind John Astrup. Martin Moll on lap 13 is P2. Ian Morton is P8 on mediums. Ian Morton entering the pits after 3 laps on mediums is P8. Brian Patterson on lap 13 is P5, 0.4 behind John Astrup. John Astrup is P4. Best lap is a 2:03.712. 2.697 of the fastest lap. Martin Moll is P2. John Astrup on lap 13 is P4, 0.4 behind Rene Robertson. Rene Robertson was 1.2 faster last lap. Richard Ogden is P7. John Astrup is P4, 0.3 behind Rene Robertson. Rene Robertson was 1.6 faster last lap. Rene Robertson on lap 14 is P3 battling John Astrup. John Astrup is P3, 0.1 ahead of Rene Robertson. John Astrup is now P5. John Astrup is now P4. David Forsyth is P6. Best lap is a 2:04.712. 3.697 of the fastest lap. David Forsyth is now P5. Eric Bohm entering the pits after 6 laps on mediums is P1. Eric Bohm is P1. Brian Patterson is P3 on mediums, 4.6 behind Martin Moll. Eric Bohm is P1. Richard Ogden is P7. Eric Bohm is P1, 0.8 ahead of Martin Moll. Brian Patterson is P3. Eric Bohm is P1, 1.1 ahead of Martin Moll. John Astrup from New Zealand is P4, 3.0 behind Brian Patterson. Brian Patterson was 6.3 faster last lap. Richard Ogden is P7. Eric Bone is P1, 2.3 ahead of Martin Moll. Richard Ogden on lap 15 is P7. Brian Patterson is P3, 3.9 ahead of John Astrup. David Forsyth is P5. Martin Moll is P2. David Forsyth is P5. Rene Robertson is P6. John Astrup is P4, 1.6 behind Brian Patterson. Eric Bohm is P1. The leader has just finished the race. Eric Bohm finished P1. Martin Moll finished P2. Brian Patterson finished P3. John Astrup finished P4. David Forsyth finished P5. Rene Robertson finished P6. Richard Ogden is P7. Richard Ogden finished P7. Ian Morton is P8. David Forsyth finished P5. David Forsyth